The group that's gathering at Scrooby by about 1600 or so is actually best thought of as a radical kind of subset of English Protestants. These are individuals who come to be known as separatists. The separatists basically not only believed that the Anglican Church needed reformation, they'd actually arrived at the conclusion that the Anglican Church was not a true church, that it was so far in divergence from what they believed was the true requirements of Scripture, that they really couldn't in good conscience associate or worship with Anglicans. They had to withdraw, they had to separate from the Anglican Church.
This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. In this show, we celebrate Thanksgiving, and it's the only American holiday that's actually remained relatively innocent. It's not something that we've been able to commercialize, but there is something going on here that's more than just feasting, family, and football. Robert Tracy McKenzie is a professor of history at Wheaton College. He's also the author of The First Thanksgiving. He's here to tell us the story of this quintessentially American holiday. Let's take a listen.
The story of the Pilgrims and the First Thanksgiving, in many respects, is one chapter in a much, much larger story, a story that is grounded in an enormous phenomenon that we remember as the Protestant Reformation. In the early years of the 1500s, individuals like Martin Luther, the German theologian and monk, had begun to work toward reforming the Catholic Church, changing some of its theological teachings, some of its church practices, some of its governing structure. And Luther found that that was essentially impossible to accomplish within the confines of the Catholic Church, ultimately leading to a break with the Catholic Church. In 1517, on Halloween evening, Luther famously put up his 95 Theses, his 95 statements of protest about Catholic teaching. This caused his relationship with the Pope, with the Catholic hierarchy, to deteriorate pretty rapidly, leading ultimately to the Pope declaring Luther a heretic in 1520 and prompting Luther ultimately to break with the Catholic Church to establish an independent church, a protesting church. And so Protestantism was born. The Protestant Reformation reaches England maybe a generation later during the reign of King Henry VIII. And ultimately, Henry himself also breaks with the Catholic Church and establishes an independent Church of England, church we often remember as the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church, in many respects, though still retained a lot of the teaching, a lot of the practices, a lot of the hierarchy of Catholicism. So within England, there's a core group of English Christians who begin to work to purify the Church of England of its Catholic remnants. And they begin to be referred to, often quite sarcastically and critically, as Protestants. The group that's gathering at Scrooby by about 1600 or so is actually best thought of as a radical kind of subset of English Protestants. These are individuals who come to be known as separatists. The separatists basically not only believed that the Anglican Church needed reformation, they'd actually arrived at the conclusion that the Anglican Church was not a true church, that it was so far in divergence from what they believed was the true requirements of Scripture, that they really couldn't in good conscience associate or worship with Anglicans. They had to withdraw, they had to separate from the Anglican Church. And so we need to understand then this core group is the most radical of the most radical protesting Christians. In separating from the Anglican Church, they're actually defying the established Church of England. They're actually defying the monarchy of England. And so in a certain sense, they are considered in many respects outlaws against both church and state. This group ultimately is going to face some persecution in Scrooby. We can exaggerate it, but we know that one member of the congregation was in fact thrown into prison. 3 other leaders of the congregation were under suspicion. There were warrants out for their arrest. They actually go into hiding. And ultimately, it led to the conclusion that this group was simply not going to be allowed to worship separately, worship faithfully as they understood it. And so they decided that they would have no alternative but to leave England. Now, when we remember the Pilgrim story, one of the ways that we remember it incorrectly, I think it's really important to go back and recapture this truth, is that Pilgrims don't leave England directly for New England. They don't leave Scrooby and head for North America. There's in fact an intermediate step in their migration. They actually go not to North America, but to Holland. And so they're able to get out of the country. It's a complicated and dangerous undertaking. But around the year 1608, they make their way to Holland, settling first of all in Amsterdam, where they stay for a matter of months, and then finally relocating about 30 miles to the southwest to a town of Leiden. And it's Leiden where they reside for the next 12 years. And it's from Leiden that they migrate to North America in 1620. We have to understand that Leiden was, although smaller than Amsterdam, it was still a large city for its day. It had a population of about 40,000. These were individuals who had migrated from a tiny rural agricultural village in England, and they found themselves in a vibrant, growing, industrializing city. It was foreign in many, many ways. We sometimes talk about how the Pilgrims came to a new world when they migrated to North America. But in a real sense, they were going to a new world when they migrated to Holland. It was so foreign from what they knew, so different, that it's hard for us to exaggerate the challenge. So now rural people were living in a large city. Farm folk were having to earn their living in industrial settings as employees in a textile manufacturing line of work. And it was hard. And yet, one of the important things that they would have stressed is that they experienced a great deal of religious freedom. Leiden and Holland generally was known for its religious toleration. It was religiously diverse, but there were problems.